Hey, Amy, how are you? Welcome in. And Deborah, welcome. Hey, Peggy, how are you? Amy, hello. Gonna have to call you guys Amy 1 and Amy 2. I'm doing all right. It's been a weekend, but, you know, we're getting by. I'm upright and mobile. That's what's important. Thank you, local wise guy. I appreciate it. Oh, things for Papa aren't doing too bad. I'm still looking for some part-time gigs to supplement the income. But you know, hey, it is what it is. Hey, Sunshine, how are you? Hey, Jules, welcome. Well, we've got a good story tonight. Good evening, Jasmine. How are you? Well, I am happy you made it too. Hey, Marcy, how are you? 109 degree. Holy crow! That's not. Yeah, I no. I think it was 77 here today, and that's enough. Yep, you're here with a little bit of extra time too. If you guys could do me a favor and smash that like button and do what you can to share the live, that would be extremely grateful for that. 85 in Rhode Island today. Woof. Hey, Queen, how are you? Welcome in. Camping down in Albany. Oh, I like Albany. Spent a lot of time around that area when I was a kid. Hey, Crazy Mama, welcome in. Hey, Jules, how are you? Woo! Well, hello, Wiener Dog Dad. How are you? Hey, Yuritsa, welcome back. It's good to see you. Oh, thank you guys for the gifts and the likes, and that's awesome. And all that engagement helps TikTok see that this live is worth sending out to other people. So I appreciate that. I hate to have to ask for that too, because I don't know, that's just not what I'm about. But you know, it helps. Tessa. And how is my Tessa today? I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad everybody's here. Melting. That's what you get for living in Texas. And how hot is it down there in the Texas? Hey, Eddie, welcome in, brother. A muggy 98. Well, I think Wings has got you beat. Hello, Stephanie. How are you? Yeah, we only hit 77 today. We won't hit our heat wave until, I think, Tuesday. Well, at least we're all commiserating together. Even in the mountains in Norway, we got 30 degrees Celsius. Yeah, my daughter was complaining. Dino Life, no, I have not started yet. I'll be starting here in about 3 minutes. My daughter is in Liverpool in the UK, and she's been saying it's really hot over there, and they don't do air conditioning, so it's like, holy cow. Yes, Sarah B., you have perfect timing. See, now, Tessa, you say Hutto, and all I can think of is ho, 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 ho. I am a horrible person. It's our city mascot. I would think that I would... That would be amazing if I believed it were true. It's hippos. Oh, man. That's entirely too funny. That is entirely too funny. All right. Well, I think everybody's ready for some Tuck Everlasting. I have never read this book, so this is actually a cold read for me. Cold read for me. But we are all ready to go. The Hutto Hippos. Wow. All right. Well, I mean, hippos are pretty fierce. So, they're like one of the most dangerous animals in Africa, I guess. Chase down and escape hippo from the circus. Wow. I'm intrigued and also slightly terrified. That's amazing. That is amazing. Hello, music lover. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Well, you know what? Hello, Oz. How are you? It is 9:10 here on the East Coast, and it is time. Escaping. That's good. I like that. Yes, the most deadliest large land animal. Hippos kill more people than tigers, or lions, apparently. Anyway, all right. Well, I think it's time to start. What do you guys think? Well, this is... I look forward to Sundays. I mean, I go live 3 other times a week, but I still look forward to Sundays. This is the night that started it all. It's funny because when I log into Lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my! And apparently more than Mothman too. It's and Bigfoot. It's been almost a year that I've been doing this. I think TikTok Live Studio said I am on week 42, which I don't think is true. I think I've been doing this longer than that, but it might be different than 4. But anyway, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary, so I kind of wonder if we can. Get to 25,000 followers before the 1 year anniversary. Hey, Grandma D9, how are you? Not that that's all, do it anyway. But maybe we can do something special for. Oh, thank you, Dino Life. I really appreciate that. Sometimes it doesn't feel like TikTok is I'm a favorite of TikTok, but but we love the TikTok shop and we love TikTok. So I'm kind of wondering what maybe we should do to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of Storytime with UndeadPapa. Well, I appreciate that. I do. But we can talk more. Thank you, Pamela. I appreciate you. All right. Well, dance party. Don't you get started. only if you guys will throw virtual dollar bills at me. Anyway, good evening, everyone. And welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa. This is Sunday night bedtime stories. Yeah, Tessa, we've been over this. If I drop it low, I'm not probably getting back up. I'm just, it's going to be another trip to the doctor where the doctor goes, well, you're at that age. AVG, welcome in, sir. Tonight we begin the story of a young girl, a family with an extraordinary secret, and a quiet little wood where nothing is quite what it seems. A tale of friendship, wonder, and one simple question that has fascinated humanity for as long as we have told stories. Sometimes the greatest adventures don't begin with a battle or a journey, but with a single choice that changes everything. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back, and relax, because story time is about to begin. This is Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. Prologue. The first week of August hangs at the very top of summer, the top of the livelong year, like the highest seat of a Ferris wheel when it pauses in its turning. The weeks that come before are only a climb from balmy spring, and those that follow a drop to the chill of autumn. But the first week of August is motionless and hot. It is curiously silent, too, with blank white dawns and glaring noons, and sunsets smeared with too much color. Often at night there is lightning, but it quivers all alone. There is no thunder, no relieving rain. These are strange and breathless days. The dog days, when people are led to do things they are sure to be sorry for after. One day at that time, not so very long ago, 3 things happened, and at first there appeared to be no connection between them. At dawn, May Tuck set out on her horse for the wood at the edge of the village of Tree Gap. She was going there, as she did once every 10 years, to meet her 2 sons, Miles and Jesse. At noontime, Winnie Foster, whose family owned the Tree Gap wood, lost her patience at last and decided to think about running away. At sunset, a stranger appeared at the Fosters' gate. He was looking for someone, but he didn't say who. No connection, you would agree, but things can come together in strange ways. The wood was at the center of the hub of the wheel. All wheels must have a hub. A Ferris wheel has one, as the sun is the hub of the wheeling calendar. Fixed points they are, and best left undisturbed, for without them nothing holds together. But sometimes people find this out too late. 1. The road that led to Tree Gap had been trod out long before by a herd of cows who were, to say the least, relaxed. It wandered along in curves and easy angles, swayed off and up in a pleasant tangent to the top of a small hill, ambled down again between fringes of bee-hung clover, and then cut sideways across a meadow. Here its edges blurred. It widened and seemed to pause, suggesting tranquil bovine picnics, slow chewing, and thoughtful contemplation of the infinite. And then it went on again, and came at last to the wood. But on reaching the shadows of the first trees, it veered sharply, swung out in a wide arc as if for the first time it had reason to think where it was going, and passed around. On the other side of the wood, the sense of easiness dissolved. The road no longer belonged to the cows. It became instead, and rather abruptly, the property of people. And all at once the sun was uncomfortably hot, the dust oppressive, and the meager grass along its edges somewhat ragged and forlorn. On the left stood the first house, a square and solid cottage with a touch-me-not appearance, surrounded by grass cut painfully to the quick, and enclosed by a capable iron fence some 4 feet high, which clearly said, "Move on, we don't want you here." So the road went humbly by, and made its way past cottages more and more frequent, but less and less forbidding, into the village. But the village doesn't matter, except for the jailhouse and the gallows. The first house only is important. The first house, the road, and the wood. There was something strange about the wood. If the look of the first house suggested that you'd better pass it by, so did the look of the wood, but for quite a different reason. The house was so proud of itself that you wanted to make a lot of noise as you passed, and maybe even throw a rock or two. But the wood had a sleeping, other-world appearance that made you want to speak in whispers. This, at least, is what the cows must have thought. Let it keep its peace. We won't disturb it. Whether the people felt that way about the wood or not is difficult to say. There were some, perhaps, who did. But for the most part, the people followed the road around the wood because that was the way it led. There was no road through the wood. And anyway, for the people, there was another reason to leave the wood to itself. It belonged to the Fosters, the owners of the Touch-Me-Not cottage, and was therefore private property in spite of the fact that it lay outside the fence and was perfectly accessible. The ownership of land is an odd thing when you come to think of it. How deep, after all, can it go? If a person owns a piece of land, does he own it all the way down in ever-narrowing dimensions till it meets all other pieces of the center of the earth? Or does ownership consist only of a thin crust under which the friendly worms have never heard of trespassing? In any case, the wood being on top of, except of course for its roots, was owned bud and bough by the Fosters in the Touch-Me-Not cottage. And if they never went there, if they never wandered in among the trees, well, that was their affair. Winnie, the only child of the house, never went there, though she sometimes stood inside the fence, carelessly banging a stick against the iron bars, and looked at it. But she had never been curious about it. Nothing ever seems interesting when it belongs to you, only when it doesn't. And what is interesting, anyway, about a slim few acres of trees? There will be a dimness shot through with bars of sunlight, a great many squirrels and birds, and a deep, damp mattress of leaves on the ground, and all the other things just as familiar, if not so pleasant, things like spiders, thorns, and grubs. In the end, however, it was the cows who were responsible for the wood's isolation. And the cows, through some wisdom they were not wise enough to know that they possessed, were very wise indeed. If they had made their road through the wood instead of around it, then the people would have followed the road. The people would have noticed the giant ash tree at the center of the wood, and then, in time, they'd have noticed the little spring bubbling up among its roots in spite of the pebbles piled there to conceal it. And that would have been a disaster so immense that this weary old earth, owned or not to its fiery core, would have trembled on its axis like a beetle on a pin. And so at dawn, that day in the first week of August, May Tuck woke up and lay for a while beaming at the cobwebs on the ceiling. At last she said aloud, "The boys'll be home tomorrow." May's husband, on his back beside her, did not stir. He was still asleep, and the melancholy creases that folded his daytime face were smoothed and slack. He snored gently, and for a moment the corners of his mouth turned upward in a smile. Tuck almost never smiled except in sleep. May sat up in bed and looked at him tolerantly. "The boys'll be home tomorrow," she said again, a little more loudly. Tuck twitched and the smile vanished. He opened his eyes. "Why'd you have to wake me up?" he sighed. "I was having that dream again. The good one, where we're all in heaven and never heard of Tree Gap." May sat there frowning, a great potato of a woman with a round, sensible face and brown eyes. "It's no use having that dream," she said. "Nothing's going to change." "You tell me that every day," said Tuck, turning away from her onto his side. "Anyways, I can't help what I dream." "Maybe not," said May. "But all the same, you should have got used to things by now." Tuck groaned. "I'm going back to sleep," he said. "Not me," said May. "I'm going to take the horse and go down to the wood to meet them." "Meet who?" "The boys, Tuck, our sons. I'm going to ride down to meet them." "Better not do that," said Tuck. "I know," said May. "But I just can't wait to see them. Anyways, it's 10 years since I went to Tree Gap. No one will remember me. I'll ride in at sunset just to the wood. I won't go into the village. But even if someone did see me, they won't remember. They never did before, now did they?" "Suit yourself, then," Tuck said into his pillow. "I'm going back to sleep." May Tuck climbed out of bed and began to dress. 3 petticoats, a rusty brown skirt with an enormous pocket, and an old cotton jacket, and a knitted shawl which she pinned across her bosom with a tarnished metal brooch. The sounds of her dressing were so familiar to Tuck that he could say, without opening his eyes, "You don't need that shawl, it's the middle of the summer." May ignored his observation. Instead, she said, "Will you be all right? We won't get back till late tomorrow." Tuck rolled over and made a rueful face at her. "What in the world could possibly happen to me?" "That's so," said May. "I keep forgetting." "I don't," said Tuck. "Have a nice time." And in a moment he was asleep again. May sat on the edge of the bed and pulled on a pair of short leather boots so thin and soft with age it was a wonder they held together. Then she stood and took from the washstand beside the bed a little square-shaped object, a music box painted with roses and lilies of the valley. It was the one pretty thing she owned, and she never went anywhere without it. Her fingers strayed to the winding key on its bottom, but glancing at the sleeping Tuck, she shook her head, gave the little box a pat, and dropped it into her pocket. Then, last of all, she pulled down over her ears a blue straw hat with drooping, exhausted brim. But before she put on the hat, she brushed her gray-brown hair and wound it into a bun at the back of her neck. She did this quickly and skillfully without a single glance in the mirror. May Tuck didn't need a mirror, though she had one propped up on the washstand. She knew very well what she would see in it. Her reflection had long since ceased to interest her, for May Tuck and her husband, and Miles and Jessie too, had all looked exactly the same for 87 years. Three. At noon of that same day, in the first week of August, Winnie Foster sat on the bristly grass that just inside the fence and said to a large toad who was squatting a few yards across the road, "I will, though. You'll see. Maybe even first thing tomorrow, while everyone's still asleep." It was hard to know whether the toad was listening or not. Certainly Winnie had given it good reason to ignore her. She had come out to the fence, very cross, very near the boiling point, on a day that was itself near to boiling, and had noticed the toad at once. It was the only living thing in sight except for a stationary cloud of hysterical gnats suspended in the heat above the road. Winnie had found some pebbles at the base of the fence, and, for lack of another way to show how she felt, had flung one at the toad. It missed altogether, as she'd fully intended it should, but she made a game of it anyway, tossing pebbles at such an angle that they passed through the gnat cloud on their way to the toad. The gnats were too frantic to notice these intrusions, however, and since every pebble missed its final mark, the toad continued to squat and grimace without so much as a twitch. Possibly it felt resentful, or perhaps it was only asleep. In either case, it gave her not a glance when at last she ran out of pebbles and sat down to tell it her troubles. "Look here, Toad," she said, thrusting her arms through the bars of the fence and plucking at the weeds on the other side. "I don't think I can stand it much longer." At this moment a window at the front of the cottage was flung open, and a thin voice, her grandmother's, piped, "Winifred, don't sit on that dirty grass. You'll stain your boots and stockings." And another, firmer voice, her mother's, added, "Come in now, Winnie, right away. You'll get heat-stroke out there on a day like this, and your lunch is ready." "See?" said Winnie to the toad. "That's just what I mean. It's like that every minute. If I had a sister or a brother, there'd be someone else for them to watch. But as it is, there's only me. I'm tired of being looked at all the time. I want to be by myself for a change." She leaned her forehead against the bars and, after a short silence, went on in a thoughtful tone. "I'm not exactly sure what I'd do, but something interesting, something that's all mine, something that would make some kind of difference in the world. It'd be nice to have a new name to start with, or one that's not all worn out from being called so much. And I might even decide to have a pet, maybe a big old toad like you, that I could keep in a nice cage with lots of grass and—" At this the toad stirred and blinked, It gave a heave of muscles and plopped its heavy mud ball of a body a few inches further away from her. "I suppose you're right," said Winnie. "Then you'd be just the way I am now. Why should you have to be cooped up in a cage, too? It'd be better if I could be like you, out in the open and making up my own mind. Do you know they've hardly ever let me out of this yard all by myself? I'll never be able to do anything important if I stay in here like this. I expect I'd better run away." She paused and peered anxiously at the toad to see how it would receive this staggering idea, but it showed no signs of interest. "You think I wouldn't care, don't you?" she said accusingly. "I will, though. You'll see. Maybe even first thing in the morning, while everyone's still asleep." "Winnie!" came the firm voice from the window. "All right, I'm coming," she cried, exasperated, and then added quickly, I'll be right there, Mama." She stood up, brushing at her legs where bits of itchy grass clung to her stockings. The toad, as if it saw that their interview was over, stirred again, bunched up, and bounced itself clumsily off toward the wood. Winnie watched it go. "Hop away, Toad," she called after it. "You'll see. Just wait till morning." Well, I hope everybody's enjoying the story so far. I appreciate you all being here. 4. At sunset of the same long day, a stranger came rolling up the road from the village and paused at the Fosters' gate. Winnie was once again in the yard, this time intent on catching fireflies, and at first she didn't notice him. But after a few moments of watching her, he called out, "Good evening." He was remarkably tall and narrow, this stranger standing there. His long chin faded off into a thin, unapologetic beard, but his suit was a jaunty yellow that seemed to glow a little in the fading light. A black hat dangled from one hand, and as Winnie came toward him, he passed the other through his dry gray hair, settling it smoothly. "Well now," he said in a light voice, "out for fireflies, are you?" "Yes," said Winnie. "A lovely thing to do on a summer evening," said the man richly. "A lovely entertainment. I used to do it myself when I was your age, but of course that was a long, long time ago." He laughed, gesturing in self-deprecation with long, thin fingers. His tall body moved continuously. A foot tapped, a shoulder twitched, and it moved in angles rather jerkily. But at the same time he had a kind of grace, like a well-handled marionette. Indeed, he seemed almost to hang suspended here in the twilight. But Winnie, though she was half charmed, was suddenly reminded of the stiff black ribbons they had hung on the door of the cottage for her grandfather's funeral. She frowned and looked at the man more closely, but his smile seemed perfectly all right, quite agreeable and friendly. "Is this your house?" asked the man, folding his arms now and leaning against the gate. "Yes," said Winnie. "Do you want to see my father?" "Perhaps in a bit," said the man. "But I'd like to talk to you first. Have you and your family lived here long?" "Oh, yes," said Winnie. "We've lived here forever." "Forever?" the man echoed thoughtfully. It was not a question, but Winnie decided to explain anyway. "Well, not forever, of course, but as long as there have been any people here. My grandmother was born here. She says this was all trees once, just one big forest everywhere around. But it's mostly all cut down now, except for the wood." "I see," said the man, pulling at his beard. "So, of course, you know everyone and everything that goes on.
Well, not especially, said Winnie. At least I don't. Why? The man lifted his eyebrows. Oh, he said. Well, I'm looking for someone, a family. I don't know anybody much, said Winnie, with a shrug. But my father might. You could ask him. I believe I shall, said the man. I do believe I shall. At this moment the cottage door opened, and the lamp glow that spilled across the grass. Winnie's grandmother appeared. Winifred, who are you talking to out there? It's a man, Granny, she called back. He says he's looking for someone. What's that? Said the old woman. She picked up her skirts and came down the path to the gate. What did you say he wants? The man on the other side of the fence bowed slightly. Good evening, madam, he said. How delightful to see you looking so fit. And why shouldn't I be fit? She retorted, peering at him through the fading light. His yellow suit seemed to surprise her, and she squinted suspiciously. We haven't met, that I can recall. Who are you? Who are you looking for? The man answered neither of these questions. Instead, he said, This young lady tells me you've lived here for a long time, so I thought you would probably know everyone who comes and goes. The old woman shook her head. I don't know everyone, she said, nor do I want to. And I don't stand outside in the dark discussing such a thing with strangers. Neither does Winifred. So— And then she paused. For though the twilight sounds of crickets and sighing trees, a faint, whispering, surprising wisp of music came floating to them, and all three turned toward it, toward the wood. It was a tinkling little melody, and in a few moments it stopped. My stars, said Winnie's grandmother, her eyes round. I do believe it's come again after all these years. She pressed her wrinkled hands together, forgetting the man in yellow. Did you hear that, Winifred? That's it. That's the elf music I told you about. Why, it's been ages since I heard it last. And this is the first time you've ever heard it, isn't it? Wait till we tell your father. And she seized Winnie's hand and turned to go back into the cottage. Wait, said the man at the gate. He stiffened, and his voice was eager. You've heard that music before, you say? But before he could get an answer, it began again, and they all stopped to listen. This time it tinkled its way faintly through the little melody 3 times before it faded. It sounds like a music box, said Winnie when it was over. Nonsense! It's elves, crowed her grandmother excitedly. And then she said to the man at the gate, You'll have to excuse us now. She shook the gate latch under his nose to make sure it was locked, and then, taking Winnie by the hand once more, she marched up the path into the cottage, shutting the door firmly behind her. But the man in the yellow suit stood tapping his foot in the road for a long time, all alone, looking at the wood. The last stains of sunset had melted away, and the twilight died too. As he stood there, though its remnants clung reluctantly to everything that was pale in color, pebbles, the dusty road, the figure of the man itself, turning them blue and blurry. Then the moon rose. The man came to himself and sighed. His expression was one of intense satisfaction. He put on his hat, and in the moonlight his long fingers were graceful and very white. Then he turned and disappeared down the shadowy road, and as he went, he whistled very softly the tinkling little melody from the wood. Five. Winnie woke early next morning. The sun was only just opening its own eye on the eastern horizon, and the cottage was full of silence. But she realized that sometime during the night she had made up her mind. She would not run away today. Where would I go anyway? She asked herself. There's nowhere else I really want to be. But in another part of her head, the dark part where her oldest fears were housed, she knew there was another sort of reason for staying at home. She was afraid to go away alone. It was one thing to talk about being by yourself, doing important things, but quite another when the opportunity arose. The characters in the stories she read always seemed to go off without a thought or care. But in real life, well, the world was a dangerous place. People were always telling her so, and she would not be able to manage without protection. They were always telling her that, too. No one ever said precisely what it was that she would not be able to manage, but she did not need to ask. Her own imagination supplied the horrors. Still, it was galling, this having to admit she was afraid, and when she remembered the toad, she felt even more disheartened. What if the toad should be out by the fence again today? What if he should laugh at her secretly and think she was a coward? Well, anyway, she could at least slip out right now, she decided, and go into the wood to see if she could discover what had really made the music the night before. That would be something, anyway. She did not allow herself to consider the idea that making a difference in the world might require a bolder venture. She merely told herself consolingly, "Of course, while I'm in the wood, if I decide to never come back, well, then that will be that." She was able to believe in this because she needed to, and believing was her own true promising friend once more. It was another heavy morning, already hot and breathless, but in the wood the air was cooler and smelled agreeably damp. Winnie had been no more than 2 slow minutes walking timidly under the interlacing branches. Oh, excuse me, holy cow. Winnie had been no more than 2 slow minutes walking timidly under the interlacing branches when she wondered why she had never come here before. "Why, it's so nice," she thought with great purpose, great surprise. For the wood was full of light, entirely different from the light she was used to. It was green and amber and alive, quivering in splotches on the padded ground, fanning into sturdy stripes between the tree trunks. There were little flowers she did not recognize, white and palest blue, and endless tangled vines here and there on a fallen log, half rotted but soft with patches of sweet green velvet moss. And there were creatures everywhere. The air fairly hummed with their daybreak activity. Beetles and birds and squirrels and ants and countless other things unseen, all gentle and self-absorbed and not in the least alarming. There was even, she saw with satisfaction, the toad. It was squatting on a low stump, and she might not have noticed it, for it looked more like a mushroom than a living creature sitting there. As she came abreast of it, however, it blinked, and the movement gave it away. "See," she exclaimed, "I told you I'd be here first thing in the morning." The toad blinked again and nodded. Or perhaps it was only swallowing a fly, but then it nudged itself off the edge of the stump and vanished in the underbrush. "It must have been watching for me," said Winnie to herself, and was very glad she had come. She wandered for a long time, looking at everything, listening to everything, proud to forget the tight pruned world outside, humming a little now, trying to remember the pattern of the melody she had heard the night before. And then, up ahead, in a place where the light seemed brighter and the ground somewhat more open, something moved. Winnie stopped abruptly and crouched down. "If it's really elves," she thought, "I can have a look at them." And though her instinct was to turn and run, she was pleased to discover that her curiosity was stronger. She began to creep forward. She would go just close enough, she told herself, just close enough to see, and then she would turn and run. But when she came nearer, up behind a sheltering tree trunk, and peered around it, her mouth dropped open, and all thought of running melted away. There was a clearing directly in front of her, at the center of which an enormous tree thrust up, its thick roots rumpling the ground 10 feet around in every direction. Sitting relaxed with his back against the trunk was a boy, almost a man, and he seemed so glorious to Winnie that she lost her heart at once. He was thin and sunburned, this wonderful boy, with a thick mop of curly brown hair, and he wore his battered trousers and loose, grubby shirt with as much self-assurance as if they were silk and satin. A pair of green suspenders, more decorative than useful, gave the finishing touch, for he was shoeless, and there was a twig tucked between the toes of one foot. He waved the twig idly as he sat there, his face turned up to gaze at the branches far above him. The golden morning light seemed to glow all around him, while brighter patches, now on his lean brown hands, now on his hair and face, as the leaves stirred over his head. Then he rubbed an ear carelessly, yawned and stretched. Shifting his position, he turned his attention to a little pile of pebbles next to him. As Winnie watched, scarcely breathing, he moved the pile carefully to one side, pebble by pebble. Beneath the pile the ground was shiny wet. The boy lifted a final stone, and Winnie saw a low spurt of water, arching up and returning like a fountain into the ground. He bent and put his lips to the spurt, drinking noiselessly, and then he sat up again and drew his shirt-sleeve across his mouth. As he did this, he turned his face in her direction, and their eyes met. For a long moment they looked at each other in silence. The boy, with his arm still raised to his mouth, neither of them moved. At last his arm fell to his side. "You may as well come out," he said with a frown. Winnie stood up, embarrassed and, because of that, resentful. "I didn't mean to watch you," she protested as she stepped into the clearing. "I didn't know anyone would be here." The boy eyed her as she came forward. "What are you doing here?" he asked her sternly. "It's my wood," said Winnie, surprised by the question. "I can come here whenever I want to. At least, I was never here before, but I could have come any time." "Oh," said the boy, relaxing a little. "You're one of the Fosters, then?" "I'm Winnie," she said. "Who are you?" "I'm Jesse Tuck," he answered. "How do?" And he put out a hand. Winnie took his hand, staring at him. He was even more beautiful up close. "Do you live nearby?" she managed at last, letting go of his hand reluctantly. "I never saw you before. Do you come here a lot? No one's supposed to. It's our wood." Then she added quickly, "It's all right, though, if you come here. I mean, it's all right with me." The boy grinned. "No, I don't live nearby. And no, I don't come here often, just passing through. And thanks, I'm glad it's all right with you." "That's good," said Winnie irreverently. She stepped back and sat down primly a short distance from him. How old are you, anyway? She asked, squinting at him. There was a pause. At last he said, Why do you want to know? I just wondered, said Winnie. All right. I'm 104 years old, he told her solemnly. No, I mean really, she persisted. Well, then, he said, if you must know, I'm 17. 17? That's right. Oh, said Winnie hopelessly. 17. That's old. You have no idea, he agreed with a nod. Winnie had the feeling he was laughing at her, but decided it was a nice kind of laughing. Are you married? She asked next. This time he laughed out loud. No, I'm not married. Are you? Now it was Winnie's turn to laugh. No, of course not, she said. I'm only 10, but I'll be 11 pretty soon. And then you'll get married? He suggested. Winnie laughed again, her head on one side, admiring him, and then she pointed to the spurt of the water. Is that good to drink? She asked. I'm thirsty. Jessie Tuck's face was instantly serious. Oh, that? No, it's not, he said quickly. You mustn't drink from it. It comes right up out of the ground. It's probably pretty dirty. And she began to pile the pebbles over it. He began to pile the pebbles over it again. But you drank some, Winnie reminded him. Oh, did you see that? He looked at her anxiously. Well, me, I'll drink anything. I mean, I'm used to it. It wouldn't be good for you, though. Why not? Said Winnie. She stood up. It's mine anyway, if it's in the wood. I want some. I'm about as dry as dust. And she went to where he sat and knelt down beside the pile of pebbles. Believe me, Winnie Foster, said Jessie, it would be terrible for you if you drank any of this water. Just terrible. I can't let you. Well, I still don't see why not, said Winnie plaintively. I'm getting thirstier every minute. If it didn't hurt you, it won't hurt me. If my papa was here, he'd let me have some. You're not going to tell him about it, are you? Said Jessie. His face had gone very pale under its sunburn. He stood up and put a bare foot firmly on the pile of pebbles. I knew this would happen sooner or later. Now what am I going to do? As he said this, there was a crashing sound among the trees, and a voice called, Jessie? Oh, thank goodness, said Jessie, blowing out his cheeks in relief. Here comes Ma and Miles. They'll know what to do. And sure enough, a big, comfortable-looking woman appeared, leading an old, fat horse, and at her side was a young man almost as beautiful as Jessie. It was May Tuck and her other son, Jessie's older brother, and at once, when she saw the two of them, Jessie with his foot on the pile of pebbles and Winnie on her knees beside him, she seemed to understand. Her hand flew to her bosom, grasping at the old brooch that fastened her shawl, and she went bleak. Well, boys, she said, here it is. The worst is happening at last. Yeah, Ted, it is a great opening paragraph. The whole prologue is just really, really cool. It sets it up so nicely. 6. Afterward, when she thought about it, it seemed to Winnie that the next few minutes were only a blur. First, she was kneeling on the ground, insisting on a drink from the spring. And the next thing she knew, she was seized and swung through the air open-mouthed and found herself straddling the bouncing back of the old fat horse, with Miles and Jessie trotting along on either side, while May ran puffing ahead, dragging on the bridle. Winnie had often been haunted by visions of what it would be like to be kidnapped, but none of her visions had been like this, with their kidnappers just as alarmed as she was herself. She had always pictured a troop of burly men with long black mustaches who would tumble her into a blanket and bear her off like a sack of potatoes while she pleaded for mercy. But instead, that was they, May, Tuck, and Miles and Jessie, who were pleading. "Please, child, dear, dear child, don't you be scared." This was May, trying to run and call back over her shoulder at the same time. We wouldn't harm you for the world." "If you'd yelled or anything," this was Jessie, "someone might have heard you, and that's too risky." And Miles said, "We'll explain it soon as we're far enough away." Winnie herself was speechless. She clung to the saddle and gave herself up to the astonishing fact that, though her heart was pounding and her backbone felt like a pipe full of cold running water, her head was fiercely calm. Disconnected thoughts presented themselves one by one as if they had been waiting their turn in line. So this is what it's like to ride a horse. I was going to run away today anyway. What will they say when I'm not there for breakfast? I wish the toad could see me now. That woman is worried about me. Miles is taller than Jessie. I'd better duck if I don't want this next branch to knock me off. They had come to the edge of the wood now, with no sign of slowing their rapid jog. The road, where it angled across the meadow, was just ahead, dazzling white in the open sunlight. And there, standing on the road, was the man from the night before. The man in the yellow suit, his black hat on his head. Discovering him, seeing his surprise, and presented at once with choices, Winnie's mind perversely went blank. Instead of crying out for help, she merely goggled at him as they fled past the spot where he stood. May Tuck was the only one who spoke, and the most she could offer was, "Teaching our little girl how to ride." Only then did it come to Winnie that she ought to shout, wave her arms, do something. But the man had fallen way behind by that time, and she was afraid to let go of the saddle. Afraid to turn around lest she fall off the horse. In another moment it was too late. They had sped up. They had sped up the hill and down its other side, and the opportunity was lost. After another few minutes, the road led them to a place where off to the left a shallow stream looped near with willows and sheltering scrubby bushes. "Stop!" cried May. "We'll stop here." Miles and Jessie grabbed at the horse's harness, and he pulled up abruptly, nearly toppling Winnie off its back. "Lift the poor child down," May gasped, her chest heaving. "We'll go catch our breath by the water and try to put things straight before we go on." But the explanation, once they had stumbled to the banks of the stream, came hard. May seemed embarrassed, and Miles and Jessie fidgeted, glancing at their mother uneasily. No one knew how to begin. For her part, Winnie, now that the running was over, began to comprehend what was happening. And with the comprehension, her throat closed and her mouth went dry as paper. Ooh. This was no vision. This was real. The strangers were taking her away. They might do anything. She might never see her mother again. And then, thinking of her mother, she saw herself as small, weak, and helpless, and she began to cry, suddenly crushed as much by outrage as by shock. May Tuck's round face wrinkled in dismay. "Dear Lord, don't cry. Please don't cry, child," she implored. "We're not bad people. Truly we're not. We had to bring you away. You'll see why in a minute, and we'll take you back just as soon as we can. Tomorrow, I promise." When May said tomorrow, Winnie's sobs turned to wails. Tomorrow. It was like being told she would be kept away forever. She wanted to go home at once, rush back to the safety of the fence and her mother's voice from the window. May reached out to her, but she twisted away, her hands over her face, and gave herself up to weeping. "This is awful," said Jessie. "Can't you do something, Ma? The poor little tad." "We ought to have had some better plan than this," said Miles. "That's the truth," said May helplessly. "The dear Lord knows there's been time enough to think of one, and it had to happen sooner or later. We've been plain bone lucky it hasn't been before now. But I never expected it to be a child." She reached distractedly into her pocket of her skirt and took out the music box, and without thinking twisted the winding key with trembling fingers. When the tinkling melody began, Winnie's sobbing slowed. She stood by the stream, her hands still over her face, and listened. Yes, it was the same music she had heard the night before. Somehow it calmed her. It was like a ribbon tying her to familiar things. She thought, "When I get home, I'll tell Granny it wasn't elf music after all." She wiped her face as well as she could with her wet hands and turned to May. "That's the music I heard last night," she managed between recovering snuffles. "When I was out in my yard, my granny said it was elves." "Dear me, no," said May, peering at her hopefully. "It's only my music box. I didn't suppose anyone could hear it." She held it out to Winnie. "Do you want to take a look at it?" "It's pretty," said Winnie, taking the little box and turning it over in her hands. The winding key was still revolving, but more and more slowly the melody faltered. Another few widely spaced notes plinked, and then it stopped. "Wind it up if you want to," said May. "Clockwise." Winnie turned the key. It clicked faintly, and then, after several more turns, the music began to play again, brisk from its fresh winding, and merry. No one who owned a thing like this could be too disagreeable. Winnie examined the painted roses and lilies of the valley and smiled in spite of herself. "It's pretty," she repeated, handing it back to May. The music box had relaxed them all. Miles dragged a handkerchief from a back pocket and mopped at his face, and May sank down heavily on the rock, pulling off the blue straw hat and fanning herself with it. "Look here, Winnie Foster," said Jessie. "We're friends. We really are. But you gotta help us. Come sit down and we'll try to tell you why." It was the strangest story. Chapter 7. It was the strangest story Winnie had ever heard. She soon suspected they had never told it before except to each other. That she was their first real audience, for they gathered around her like children at their mother's knee, each trying to claim her attention, and sometimes they all talked at once and interrupted each other in their eagerness. 87 years before, the Tucks had come from a long way to the east looking for a place to settle. In those days the wood was not a wood, it was a forest, just as her grandmother had said. A forest that went on and on. They had thought they would start a farm as soon as they came to the end of the trees, but the trees never seemed to end. When they came to the part that was now the wood and turned from the trail to find a camping place, they happened on the spring. "It was real nice," said Jessie with a sigh. "It looked just the way it does now. A clearing, lots of sunshine, that big tree with all those knobby roots. We stopped and everyone took a drink. Even the horse." "No," said May, "the cat didn't drink. That's important." "Yes," said Miles. "Don't leave that out. We all had a drink except for the cat." "Well, anyway," Jessie went on, "the water tasted sort of strange. But we camped there overnight, and Pa carved a T on the trunk to mark where we'd been, and then we went on. They had come out of the forest at last, many miles to the west, had found a thinly populated valley, had started their farm. "We put up a house for Ma and Pa," said Miles, "and a little shack for Jessie and me. We figured we'd be starting families of our own pretty soon, and we would want our own houses." "That was the first time we'd figured there was something peculiar," said May. "Jessie fell out of a tree." "I was way up in the middle," Jessie interrupted, "trying to saw off some of the big branches before we cut her down. I lost my balance and I fell." "He plumb landed on his head," said May with a shudder. "We thought for sure he'd broke his neck. But come to find out, it didn't hurt him a bit." "Not long after," Miles went on, "some hunters came by one day at sunset, and the horse was out grazing by some trees, and they shot him. Mistook him for a deer, they said. Can you fancy that? But the thing is, they didn't kill him. The bullet went on right through him and didn't hardly even leave a mark. Then Pa got bit by a snake, and Jessie ate the poisoned toadstools. And I cut myself," said May. "Remember, slicing bread?" But it was the passage of time that worried them the most. They had worked the farm, settled down, made friends, but after 10 years, then 20, they had to face the fact that there was something terribly wrong. None of them was getting any older. "I was more than 40 by then," said Miles sadly. "I was married, I had 2 children, but from the look of me, I was still 22. My wife, she finally made up her mind I'd sold my soul to the devil. She left me, she went away, and she took the children with her." "I'm glad I never got married," Jessie put in. "It was the same with our friends," said May. They come to pull back from us. There was talk about witchcraft, black magic. Well, you can't hardly blame them, but finally we had to leave the farm. We didn't know where to go. We started back the way we came, just wandering. We was like gypsies. When we got this far, it changed, of course. A lot of the trees was gone. There was people, and Tree Gap, it was a new village. The road was here, but in those days it was mostly just a cow path. We went on into what was left of the wood to make a camp, and when we got to the clearing and the tree in the spring, we remembered it from before." "It hadn't changed, no more'n we had," said Miles. "And that was how we found out. Pa had carved a T on the tree, remember, 20 years before. But the T was just where it'd been when he'd done it. That tree hadn't grown one whit in all that time. It was exactly the same. And the T he'd carved was as fresh as if it had just been put there." Then they had remembered drinking the water, they and the horse, but not the cat. The cat had lived a long and happy life on the farm, but had died some 10 years before. So they decided at last that the source of their changelessness was the spring. "When we came to that conclusion," May went on, "Tuck said, that's my husband, Angus Tuck, he said he had to be sure once and for all. He took his shotgun and pointed at himself the best he could, and before we would stop him, he pulled the trigger. There was a long pause. May's fingers laced together in her lap, twisted with the tension of remembering. At last she said, the shot knocked him down, went into his heart. It had to, the way he aimed, and right on through him. It scarcely left a mark, just like, you shot a bullet through water, and he was just the same as he'd ever done. After that, we went sort of crazy," said Jessie, grinning at the memory. "Heck, we was going to live forever. Can you picture what it felt like to find that out?" "But then we sat down and talked it over," said Miles. We're still talking it over, Jessie said. We figured it'd be very bad if everyone knowed about that spring, said May. We begun to see what it would mean. She peered at Winnie. Do you understand, child? That water, it stops you right where you are. If you had a drink of it today, you'd stay a little girl forever. You'd never grow up. Not ever. We don't know how it works or even why, said Miles. Pa thinks it's something left over from some other plan for the way the world should be, said Jessie. Some plan that didn't work out too good. And so everything was changed. Except that spring was passed over somehow or other. Maybe he's right, I don't know. But you see, Winnie Foster, when I told you before I'm 104 years old, I was telling the truth. But I'm really only 17. And so far as I know, I'll stay 17 until the end of the world. One second. Well, that's dumb. So how is everybody enjoying the story? It's pretty good so far. I'm enjoying it. As I said, I've never... Alicia, we are at chapter 8. So we're just about... little over halfway through the night, and then we'll be we'll be finishing it tomorrow. So, but if you do want to listen to the beginning later tonight, you can go over to the tubes and look up my username UndeadPapa, and it will be there. All right. 8. Winnie did not believe in fairy tales. She had never longed for a magic wand, did not expect to marry a prince, and was scornful, most of the time, of her grandmother's elves. So now she sat mouth open, wide-eyed, not knowing what to make of this extraordinary story. It couldn't, not a bit of it, be true. And yet, it feels so fine to tell somebody, Jessie exploded. Just think, Winnie Foster, you're the only person in the world besides us who knows about it. Hold on now, said Miles cautiously. Maybe not. There might be a whole lot of others, for all we know, wandering around just like us. Maybe, but we don't know them, Jessie pointed out. We've never had anyone but us to talk to about it. Winnie, isn't that peculiar and kind of wonderful? Just think of all the things we've seen in the world, all the things we're going to see. That kind of talk will make her want to rush back and drink a gallon of the stuff, warned Miles. There's a whole lot more to it than Jessie Tuck's good times, you know. Ah, stuff, said Jessie with a shrug. We might as well enjoy it, long as we can't change it. You don't have to be such a parson all the time. I'm not being a parson, said Miles. I just think you ought to take it more serious. Now, boys, said May. She was kneeling by the stream, splashing her face and hands with cool water. Whew, such weather, she exclaimed, sitting back on her heels. She unfastened the brooch, took off her shawl, and toweled her dripping face. Well, child, she said to Winnie, standing up, now you share a secret. It's a big, dangerous secret. We've got to have your help to keep it. I expect you're full of questions, but we can't stay here no longer. She tied the shawl around her waist and sighed. It pains me to think how your ma and pa will worry, but there's just no way around it. We got to take you home with us. That's the plan. Tuck, he'll want to talk it out and make sure you see why you can't tell no one. But we're going to bring you back tomorrow, all right?" And all three of them looked at her hopefully. "All right," said Winnie, for she decided there wasn't any choice. She would have to go. They would probably make her go anyway, no matter what she said, but she felt there was nothing to be afraid of. Not really, for they seemed gentle and, in a strange way, childlike. They made her feel old, and the way they spoke to her, the way they looked at her, made her feel special, important. It was a warm, spreading feeling, entirely new. She liked it, and in spite of their story, she liked them too, especially Jessie. But it was Miles who took her hand and said, "It's really fine to have you along, even if it's only for a day or two." Then Jessie gave a great whoop and leaped into the stream, splashing mightily. "What'd you bring for breakfast, Ma?" he cried. "We can eat on the way, can't we? I'm starving." So, with the sun riding high now in the sky, they started off again, noisy in the August stillness, eating bread and cheese. Jessie sang funny old songs in a loud voice and swung like a monkey from the branches of trees, showing off shamelessly for Winnie, calling to her, "Hey, Winnie Foster, watch me, and look what I can do." And Winnie, laughing at him, lost the last of her alarm. They were friends. Her friends. She was running away after all, but she was not alone. Closing the gate on her oldest fears as she had closed the gate of her own fenced yard. She discovered the wings she'd always wished she'd had, and all at once she was elated. Where were the terrors she'd been told she should expect? She could not recognize them anywhere. The sweet earth opened out its wide four corners to her like the petals of a flower ready to be picked, and it shimmered with light and possibility till she was dizzy with it. Her mother's voice, the feel of home, receded for the moment, and her thoughts turned forward. Why, she too might live forever in this remarkable world she was only just discovering. The story of the spring, it might be true, so that when she was not rolling along on the back of the fat old horse by choice, this time she ran shouting down the road, her arms flung out, making more noise than anybody. It was good. So good, in fact, that through it all not one of them noticed that the man they had passed on the road, the man in the yellow suit, had crept up to the bushes by the stream and heard it all. The whole fantastic story. Nor did they notice that he was following now, beside the road, far behind, his mouth above the thin gray beard turned ever so slightly toward a smile. Well, hello there over on the tubes. I am glad you are enjoying it. And I'm glad you guys over here on TikTok are enjoying it too. 9. The August sun rolled up, hung at mid-heaven for a blinding hour, and at last wheeled westward before the journey was done. But Winnie was exhausted long before that. Miles carried her some of the way. The tops of her cheeks were bright pink with sunburn, her nose a vivid comic red, but she had been rescued from a more serious broiling by May, who had finally insisted that she wear the blue straw hat. It came down far over her ears and gave her a clownish appearance, but the shade from its brim was so welcome that Winnie put vanity aside and dozed gratefully in Miles' strong arms. Her own arms wound around his neck. The pastures, fields, and scrubby groves they crossed were vigorous with bees, and crickets leapt before them as if each step released a spring and flung them up like pebbles. But everything else was motionless, dry as biscuit, on the brink of burning, hoarding final reservoirs of sap, trying to hold out till the rain returned, and Queen Anne's lace lay dusty on the surface of the meadows like foam on a painted sea. It was amazing, then, to climb a long hill, to see ahead another hill, and beyond that the deep green of a scattered pine forest, and as you climbed, to feel the air ease and soften. Winnie revived, sniffing, and was able to ride the horse again, perched behind May. And to her oft-repeated question, "Are we almost there?" the welcome answer came at last, "Only a few more minutes now." A wide stand of dark pines rose up, loomed nearer, and suddenly Jessie was crying. "We're home! This is it, Winnie Foster!" And he and Miles raced on and disappeared among the trees. The horse followed, turning onto a rutted path with lumpy roots, and it was as if they had slipped in under a giant colander. The late sun's brilliance could penetrate only in scattered glimmers, and everything was silent and untouched. The ground muffled with moss and sliding needles, and the graceful arms of the pines stretched out protectively in every direction. And it was cool, blessedly cool and green. The horse picked his way carefully, and then ahead the path dropped down a steep embankment. And beyond that, Winnie, peering around May's bulk, saw a flash of color and a dazzling sparkle. Down the embankment they swayed, and there it was, a plain, homely little house, barn red, and below it the last of the sun flashing on the wrinkled surface of a tiny lake. "Oh, look!" cried Winnie. "Water!" At the same time they heard two enormous splashes, two voices roaring with pleasure. "It don't take 'em more'n a minute to pile into that pond," said May, beaming. "Well, you can't blame 'em in heat like this. You can go in, too, if you want to." Then they were at the door of the little house, and Tuck was standing there. "Where's the child?" he demanded, for Winnie was hidden behind his wife. "The boys say you brung along a real honest-to-goodness natural child." "So I did," said May, sliding down off the horse, "and here she is." Winnie's shyness returned at once when she saw the big man with his sad face and baggy trousers. But as he gazed at her, the warm, pleasing feeling spread through her again. For Tuck's head tilted to one side, his eyes went soft, and the gentlest smile in the world displaced the melancholy creases of his cheeks. He reached up to lift her from the horse's back and said, "There's just no words to tell you how happy I am to see you. It's the finest thing that's happened, and—" He interrupted himself, setting Winnie on the ground, and turned to May. "Does she know?" "'Course she knows," said May, "and that's why I brung her back. Winnie, here's my husband, Angus Tuck. Tuck, meet Winnie Foster." "How do, Winnie Foster?" said Tuck, shaking Winnie's hand rather solemnly. "Well, then," he straightened and peered down at her, and Winnie, looking back into his face, saw an expression there that made her feel like an unexpected present, wrapped in pretty paper and tied with ribbons in spite of May's blue hat, which still enveloped her head. "Well, then," Tuck repeated, "seeing you know, I'll go on and say this is the finest thing that's happened in, at least 80 years. 10. Winnie had grown up with order. She was used to it. Under the pitiless double assaults of her mother and grandmother, the cottage where she lived was always squeaking clean, mopped and swept and scoured into limp submission. There was no room for carelessness, no putting things off until later. The foster women had made a fortress out of duty. Duty. Sorry. Apologies. Within it, they were indomitable, and Winnie was in training. So she was unprepared for the homely little house beside the pond, unprepared for the gentle eddies of dust, the silver cobwebs, the mouse who lived and welcomed to him in a table drawer. There were only 3 rooms. The kitchen came first, with an open cabinet where dishes were stacked in perilous towers without the least regard for their varying dimensions. There was an enormous black stove and a metal sink. Duty. Sorry. I gotta stop doing that. This is a family show. There was an enormous black stove and a metal sink. Every surface, every wall was piled and strewn and hung with everything imaginable, from onions to lanterns to wooden spoons to washtubs, and in a corner stood Tuck's forgotten shotgun. The parlor came next, where the furniture, loose and sloping with age, was set about helter-skelter. An ancient green plush sofa lolled alone in the center, like yet another mossy fallen log, facing a soot-streaked fireplace still deep in last winter's ashes. The table with the drawer that housed the mouse was pushed off, also alone into a far corner, and 3 armchairs and an elderly rocker stood about aimlessly, like strangers at a party. Beyond this was the bathroom, where a vast and tipsy brass bedroom. Beyond this was the bedroom, where a vast and tipsy brass bed took up the most of the space. But there was a room beside it for the washstand. Lonely mirror, and opposite its foot a cavernous oak wardrobe from which leaked the faint smell of camphor. Up a steep flight of narrow stairs was a dusty loft. "That's where the boys sleep when they're home," May explained, and that was all. And yet it was not quite all, for there was everywhere evidence of their activities. May's and Tuck's, her sewing, patches and scraps of bright cloth, half-completed quilts and braided rugs, a bag of cotton batting with wisps of its contents, like snow drifting into cracks and corners, the arms of the sofa webbed with strands of thread and dangerous with needles, his wood carving, curly shavings furring the floor, and little heaps of splinters and chips, every surface dim with the sawdust of countless sandings, limbs of unassembled dolls and wooden soldiers, a ship model propped on the mouse's table waiting for its glue to dry, and a stack of wooden bowls, their sides smoothed to velvet, the topmost bowl filled with a jumble of big wooden spoons and forks, like dry, bleached bones. "We make things to sell," said May, surveying the mess approvingly. And still this was not all. For on the old beamed ceiling of the parlor, streaks of light swam and danced and wavered like a bright mirage, reflected through the windows from the sunlit surface of the pond. There were bowls of daisies everywhere, gay white and yellow, and over everything was the clean, sweet smell of water and its weeds, the chatter of a swooping kingfisher, the carol and trill of a dozen other kinds of birds, and occasionally the thrilling brass note of an unastonished bullfrog at ease somewhere along the muddy banks. Into it all came Winnie, eyes wide and very much amazed. It was a whole new idea to her that people could live in such disarray. But at the same time, she was charmed. It was comfortable. Climbing behind May up the stairs to see the loft, she thought to herself, maybe it's because they think they have forever to clean it up. And this was followed by another thought, far more revolutionary. Maybe they just don't care. The boys don't come home very much, said May as they came up into the half-light of the loft. But when they are, they bed up here. There's plenty of room. The loft was cluttered, too, with all kinds of odds and ends, but there were 2 mattresses rolled out on the floor, and fresh sheets and blankets were folded almost neatly on each, waiting to be spread. "Where do they go when they're away?" asked Winnie. "What do they do?" "Oh," said May, "they go different places, do different things. They work at what jobs they can get, trying to bring home some of their money. Miles can do carpentering, and he's pretty fair blacksmith, too. Jesse, now, he don't ever seem to get too settled himself. Of course, he's young." She stopped and smiled. "That sounds funny, doesn't it? Still, it's true, just the same. So Jesse does what strikes him at the moment, working in the fields or in saloons, things like that, whatever he comes across. But they can't stay on in any one place for long, you know. None of us can. People get too wondering." She sighed. "We've been in this house about as long as we dare, going on 20 years. It's a right nice place. Tuck's got so he's real attached to it. Then, too, it's off by itself, plenty of fish in the pond, not too far from the towns around. When we need things, we go sometimes to one, sometimes to the next, so people don't come to notice us much, and we sell where we can. But I guess we'll be moving on one of these days. It's just about time." It sounded rather sad to Winnie, never to belong anywhere. "That's too bad," she said, glancing shyly at May. "Always moving around and never having any friends or anything?" But May shrugged off this observation. "Tuck and me, we got each other," she said, "and that's a lot. The boys now, they go their separate ways. They're some different, don't always get on too good, but they come home whenever the spirit moves, and every 10 years, first week of August, they meet at the spring and come home so's we can be a family again for a little while. And that's why we was there this morning. One way or another, it all works out." She folded her arms and nodded more to herself than Winnie. "Life's got to be lived, no matter how long or short," she said calmly. "You got to take what comes. We just go along like everybody else. Sometimes I forget about what's happened to us, forget it altogether, and then sometimes it comes over me and I wonder why it happened to us. We're plain as salt, us Tucks. We don't deserve no blessings. If it is a blessing, and likewise, I don't see how we deserve to be cursed, if it's a curse. Still, there's no use trying to figure why things fall the way they do. Things just are. And fussing don't bring changes. Tuck, now, he's got a few other ideas. I expect he'll tell you. There, the boys are in from the pond."
Good night, Tessa. Sleep well. Winnie heard a burst of voices downstairs, and in a moment Miles and Jessie were climbing to the loft.
"Here, child," said May hastily. "Hide your eyes, boys. Are you decent? What'd you put on to swim in? I got Winnie up here. Do you hear me?"
"For goodness sake, Ma," said Jessie, emerging from the stairwell. "You think we're going to march around and are all together with Winnie Foster in the house?" And Miles behind him said, "We just jumped in with our clothes on, too hot and tired to shed them." It was true. They stood there side by side with their wet clothes plastered to their skins, little pools of water collecting at their feet.
"Well," said May, relieved. "All right. Find something dry to put on. Your pa's got supper nearly ready." And she hustled Winnie down the stairs. No, it's the man in the yellow suit. The man in the yellow hat is Curious George. made me laugh, though. That's good. I like that. 11. It was a good supper. Flapjacks, bacon, bread, and applesauce. But they ate sitting about in the parlor instead of around a table. Winnie had never had a meal that way before, and she watched them carefully at first to see what rules there might be that she did not know about. But there seemed to be no rules. Jessie sat on the floor and used the seat of a chair for a table, but the others held their plates in their laps. There were no napkins. It was all right then to lick the maple syrup from your fingers. Winnie was never allowed to do such a thing at home, but she had always thought it would be the easiest way. And suddenly, the meal seemed luxurious. After a few minutes, however, it was clear to Winnie that there was at least one rule. As long as there was food to eat, there was no conversation. All 4 Tucks kept their eyes and their attention on the business at hand, and in the silence given time to think, Winnie felt her elation and her thoughtless pleasure wobble and collapse. It had been different when they were out of doors, where the world belonged to everyone and no one. Here, everything was theirs alone. Everything was done their way. Eating, she realized now, was a very personal thing, not something to do with strangers. Chewing was a personal thing, yet here she was, chewing with strangers in a strange place. She shivered a little and frowned, looking round at them. That story they had told her. Why, they were crazy, she thought harshly, and they were criminals. They had kidnapped her right out of the middle of her own wood, and now she would be expected to sleep all night in this dirty, peculiar house. She had never slept in any bed but her own in her life. All these thoughts flooded at once from the dark part of her mind. She put down her fork and said unsteadily, "I want to go home." The Tucks stopped eating and looked at her surprised. May said soothingly, "Why, of course you do, child. That's only natural. I'll take you home. I promised I would, soon as we've explained a bit as to why you got to promise never to tell about the spring. That's the only reason we brung you here. We got to make you see why." Then Miles said, cheerfully, with a sudden sympathy, "There's a pretty good old rowboat. I'll take you out for a row after supper." "No, I will," said Jessie. "Let me. I found her first. Didn't I, Winnie Foster? Listen, I'll show you where the frogs are and—" "Hush," Tuck interrupted. "Everyone hush. I'll take Winnie rowing on the pond. There's a good deal to be said, and I think we better hurry up and say it. I got a feeling there ain't a whole lot of time." Jessie laughed at this and ran a hand roughly through his curls. "That's funny, Pa. It seems to me like time's the only thing we got a lot of." But May frowned. "You worried, Tuck? What's got you? No one saw us on the way up. Well, now wait a bit. Yes, they did. Come to think of it, there was a man on the road just outside Tree Gap. But he didn't say nothing." "He knows me, though," said Winnie. She had forgotten, too, about the man in the yellow suit, and now, thinking of him, she felt a surge of relief. "He'll tell my father he saw me." "He knows you?" said May, her frown deepening. "But you didn't call out to him, child. Why not?" "I was too scared to do anything," said Winnie honestly. Tuck shook his head. "I never thought we'd come to the place where we'd be scaring children," he said. "I guess there's no way to make it up to you, Winnie, but I'm sure most awful sorry that it had to happen like that. Who was this man you saw?"
"I don't know his name," said Winnie, "but he's a pretty nice man, I guess. In fact, he seemed pretty supremely nice to her now, a kind of savior." And then she added, "He came to our house last night, but he didn't go inside."
"Well, that don't sound too serious, Pa," said Miles. "Just some stranger passing by." "Just the same, we got to get you home again, Winnie," said Tuck, standing up decisively. "We've got to get you home just as fast as we can. I got a feeling this whole thing is going to come apart like wet bread. But first we got to talk. And the pond's the best place. The pond's got answers. Come along, child. Let's go out on the water." 12. The sky was a ragged blaze of red and pink and orange, and its double trembled on the surface of the pond like a color spilled from a paint box. The sun was dropping fast now, a soft red sliding egg yolk, and already to the east there was a darkening to purple. Winnie, newly brave with her thoughts of being rescued, climbed boldly into the rowboat. The hard heels of her buttoned boots made a hollow banging sound against its wet boards, loud in the warm and breathless quiet. Across the pond a bullfrog spoke a deep note of warning. Tuck climbed in, too, pushing off and settling the oars into their locks, dipped them into the silty bottom in one strong pull. The rowboat slipped from the bank then, silently, and glided out, tall water grasses whispering away from its sides, releasing it. Here and there, the still surface of the water dimpled, and bright rings spread noiselessly and vanished. "Feeding time," said Tuck softly, and Winnie, looking down, saw hosts of tiny insects skittering and skating on the surface. "Best time of all for fishing," he said, "when they come up to feed." He dragged on the oars. The rowboat slowed and began to drift gently toward the farthest end of the pond. It was so quiet that Winnie almost jumped when the bullfrog spoke again. And then, from the tall pines and birches that ringed the pond, a wood thrush caroled. The silver notes were pure and clear and lovely. "Know what that is all around us, Winnie?" said Tuck, his voice low. "Life. Moving, growing, changing, never the same 2 minutes together. This water, you look out at it every morning, and it looks the same, but it ain't. All night long it's been moving. Coming in through the stream back there to the west, slipping out through the stream down east here. Always quiet. Always new, moving on. You can't hardly see the current, can you? And sometimes the wind makes it look like it's going the other way. But it's always there. The water's always moving on. And someday, after a long while, it comes to the ocean." They drifted in silence for a time. The bullfrog spoke again, and from behind them, far back in some reedy, secret place, another bullfrog answered. In the fading light, the trees along the banks were slowly losing their dimensions, flattening into silhouettes clipped from black paper and pasted into the paling sky. The voice of a different frog, hoarser and not so deep, croaked from the nearest bank. "Know what happens then?" said Tuck. "To the water. The sun sucks some of it right out of the ocean and carries it back in clouds. And then it rains, and the rain falls into the stream, and the stream keeps moving on, taking it all back again. It's a wheel, Winnie. Everything's a wheel, turning and turning, never stopping. The frogs is part of it, and the bugs, and the fish, and the wood thrush too. and people, but never the same ones. Always coming in new, always growing and changing, and always moving on. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it is. The rowboat had drifted at last to the end of the pond, but now its bow bumped into the rotting branches of a falling tree that thrust thick fingers into the water. And though the current pulled at it, dragging its stern sideways, the boat was wedged and could not follow. The water slipped past it, out between clumps of reeds and brambles, and it gurgled down a narrow bed over stones and pebbles, foaming a little, for moving swiftly now after its slow trip between the pond's wide banks, and further down Winnie could see that it hurried into a curve, around a leaning willow, and disappeared. "It goes on," Tuck repeated. "To the ocean. But this rowboat, now, it's stuck. If we didn't move it out ourselves, it would stay here forever, trying to get loose but stuck. That's what us Tucks are, Winnie. Stuck so we can't move on. We ain't part of the wheel no more. Dropped off, Winnie. Left behind, and everywhere around us things is moving and growing and changing. You, for instance, a child now, but someday a woman, and after that moving on to make room for the new children." Winnie blinked, and all at once her mind was drowned with understanding of what he was saying. For she, yes, even she, would go out of the world willy-nilly someday, just go out, like the flame of a candle, and no use protesting. It was a certainty. She would try very hard not to think of it, but sometimes, as you know, it would be forced upon her. She raged against it, helpless and insulted, and blurted at last, "I don't want to die." "No," said Tuck calmly. "Not now. Your time's not now. But dying's part of the wheel, right there next to being born. You can't pick out the pieces you like and leave the rest. Being part of the whole thing, that's the blessing. But it's passing us by, us Tucks. Living's heavy work, but off to one side, the way we are, it's useless, too. It don't make sense. If I knowed how to climb back on the wheel, I'd do it in a minute. You can't have living without dying, so you can't call it living, what we got. We just are, we just be, like rocks beside the road." Tuck's voice was rough now, and Winnie, amazed, sat rigid. No one had ever talked to her of things like this before. "I want to grow again," he said fiercely, "and change. And if that means I got to move on at the end of it, then I want that too. Listen, Winnie, it's something you don't find out how you feel until afterwards. If people knowed about the spring down there in the tree gap, they'd all come running like pigs to slops. They'd trample each other trying to get some of that water. That'd be bad enough, but afterwards, can you imagine? All the little ones little forever, all the old ones old forever. Can you picture what that means, forever? The wheel would keep on going round, the water rolling by to the ocean, but the people would have turned into nothing but rocks by the side of the road, 'cause they wouldn't know till after, and then it'd be too late." He peered at her, and Winnie saw that his face was pinched with the effort of explaining. "Do you see now, child? Do you understand? Lord, I just got to make you understand." There was a long moment of silence. Winnie struggled with the anguish of all these things, could only sit hunched and numb, the sound of the water rolling in her ears. It was black and silky now, It lapped at the sides of the rowboat and hurried on around them into the stream. And then, down the length of the pond, a voice rang out. It was Miles, and every word across the water came clearly to their ears. "Pa! Pa, come back! Something's happened! Pa! The horse is gone! Can you hear me? Someone stole the horse!" 13. Sometime later, the man in the yellow suit slipped down from the saddle and tied the Tuck's old horse to a bar at the Foster's fence. He tried the gate. It was unlocked. He pushed through and strode up the path to the door of the cottage, though it was very late now, almost midnight. The windows glowed golden. The family had not gone to bed. The man in the yellow suit took off his hat and smoothed his hair with long white fingers. Then he knocked at the door. It was opened at once by Winnie's grandmother, and before she could speak, the man said quickly, "Ah, good evening. May I come in? I have happy news for you. I know where they've taken the little girl." And that is where we will leave the story tonight. We will be back again tomorrow night to finish. And I am so glad you all have come on this journey with me. So far, this book is just, I love it. It's great. Well, I'm glad you were really into it. Come back tomorrow. Alicia, what is your request? Oh, Kitty says, you got to set an alarm. 9 p.m. every Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. Ah, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I would have to look it up and see. My lives always start at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I read on Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Sunday, Monday are family-friendly nights where we usually do a chapter book over the course of a couple nights. And Wednesday and Friday are for short stories, horror, science fiction, stuff like that. And then if we have to, we stretch Sunday, Monday into Wednesday. So, but thank you all for being with me tonight. I really appreciate that. I'll be back on again tomorrow night. I'm glad I got you hooked. Oh, Tashana, I appreciate that. Well, we will see you all tomorrow night. Let me... All right. So that's where we will leave our story for this evening, with Winnie Foster standing at the edge of a mystery that will change the course of her life forever. Thank you all for spending a little time with me around the fire tonight. And join me again tomorrow night as we conclude the story and discover the extraordinary choice that lies at the heart of this timeless story. And if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing and becoming a superfan, or visiting the UndeadPapa Mercantile, which is linked in my bio. Every bit of support helps keep the campfire lit. Thank you all so much. I really do appreciate you, and I am just happy that you're here with me. Until then, please be kind to each other, and be kind to yourself, because kindness matters, and so do you. Good night, everyone. And good night over there on the tubes. I appreciate you all hanging out.